The deadline for big decisions is close at hand. The top man in the Texas House is betting that you'll like the results.
It's our job to deliver to make Texans' lives better. And if that produces a positive result in the election, I sure hope it does, but that's not what we're doing.
I sat down with Speaker Dennis Bonnen to get his insight into the big battles this session and the campaign to come. Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prayson. Behind closed doors, select negotiators between the House and the Senate continue to work out the details on the state budget, school finance, and property tax reform. But one of the key people at the Capitol looks ahead. This week I sat down with Speaker of the House Dennis Bonnen. He shared his insights on the sticking points still in negotiation and what comes next. One of the big sticking points for school finance, at least from the outside, looking into the conference committee, is whether to mandate a $5,000 teacher pay raise for all the teachers, or to give it more to the districts and let them kind of decide on special programs or teacher pay raises. Right. How do you think that's going to end?
Well, I think if you look at what the House passed, what we did is we told those districts that you have to use these dollars to pay your teachers better, but we're not telling them that it has to be a uniform payment across the board. In the House, we believe that we can change the profession of education by allowing districts to dynamically pay their teachers. If you have an area that's a harder place to recruit a teacher into, have the opportunity to pay someone more to go over there. Let's say there's a subject area you're struggling to find teachers in that area. Pay them more. We need to quit treating teachers all identically. I don't know a profession where if you put in the time and the effort and you do a better job than everyone else, you wouldn't be paid more.
On property taxes, for somebody who doesn't know, the reform would require an election if a taxing entity goes 3.5%, takes in more than 3.5% of revenue. What do you think Texans will notice? Will they notice a change come next year?
I think the greatest notice Texans are going to see is the transparency and the information they've never been given. We're going to show Texans for the first time exactly who, where, and when a vote will be taken to ask for more money from you as a taxpayer. And I think the transparency is what Texans are going to see above all, but they're going to have a safety net of sorts that at 3.5% for a city and county, we will create an automatic election so that if they haven't had success on shutting them down through the transparency we're going to provide them, they'll get to go to the voting box and decide whether they think their community needs those dollars.
As you know, a lot of cities have come out against this.
Sure they have. They always have.
When they bring their arguments of that we're going to have to cut into public safety, what do you tell them?
I tell them to quit using your police force as a political tool. That's what we tell them. The reality of it is they don't have to cut public safety. We're talking about allowing their budgets to increase up to 3.5%. So why would you need to cut an existing police officer when you can get 3.5% more than you already have? It's a bogus argument. But no one ever wants to cut a police officer. No one ever wants to cut a firefighter, and neither does anyone in the Texas legislature. But guess what else? If you legitimately need more money above 3.5% because of your police or your fire or what have you, your voters will agree with you.
You live in a more competitive state after the 2018 election. Do you think that what you're going to be doing here with these two big things will be enough ammo, if you will, for the Republicans to say, we delivered?
I see it differently.
Okay.
It's our job to deliver to make Texans' lives better. And if that produces a positive result in the election, I sure hope it does, but that's not what we're doing. We're here because we have got to fix our broken school finance system. We've got to reduce property taxes. We've got to reform property taxes. We've got to leave more money in our wealthy school districts. We've got to reduce recapture and Robin Hood, which we're doing significantly in our school finance bill. And we've got to put more money into classrooms. And that's our job. Now, if voters want to reward us for doing a really good job, doing things that haven't been done in decades, that'd be great.
A speech that you gave that got a lot of talk at the Young Conservatives at UT,
yes.
Which I'm paraphrasing here, but you pretty much said women aren't telling their friends to go vote Republican. For that population of Texans, do you think this has been a successful session?
I think it's been incredibly successful. And really the point I was making that day is that as Republicans, we have not spoken to women voters respectfully. We have not spoken to the issues they care about. And when we have been doing good work on the issues they care about, we don't talk about them in the right way. Again, let me tell you something. It's an important issue to women and men. That's their kids' school. I want my child's school to be the best it can be, and I want to see the Texas legislature supporting my children's school. I want to see them doing things to improve the predicament for my student, my teacher, who's helping my student learn, and that's what we're doing this session.
What's an example that you did not want to do when you talk about you've been talking to them the wrong way?
Well, quite candidly, it's a language you use. It more than anything is really an example. Now, the good news is I don't think I've been using that language. I think others have, and I think we've done a better job of improving upon that. But examples of what we have done, something that's been going on for years, it's embarrassing to the state of Texas, is having an over 2-year backlog of rape kit testing in Texas. I'm very proud of the legislation we've passed this session to eliminate that rape kit backlog, but even almost more importantly, is requiring that you within 90 days test any new rape kits. So there never will be an embarrassing 2-year backlog on rape kits in Texas.
Republicans and Democrats have worked really well together, or at least from the outside looking in the House. As we leave the legislature and go into campaign season, that Republican-Democrat relationship will probably be strained a little bit in some areas. What do you hope happens going forward with that relationship?
I hope we stick to the tradition of the Texas House, and that is that no sitting member of the House campaigns against another sitting member of the House. What makes the House unique and successful in the country, not simply here, but across the country, is that we are bipartisan. And the central component of our bipartisanship is that you don't see sitting members of the House campaigning against another sitting member of the House.
So that will include yourself? You
Absolutely.
won't campaign against a sitting Democrat?
I will not.
You heard the speaker tout the success of this session, but can you believe the hype?
Whether they achieve their goals or not it's in the eye of the beholder, right?
We'll turn to our panel for a closer look at the last week of the legislative session and the campaign to come. Texas moves closer to a new cash crop, how hemp could bring benefits and new rules for farmers. For perspective, we turn to our panel, Lauren McGaughy with the Dallas Morning News and Matt Watkins with the Texas Tribune. Thanks so much for doing this.
Of course, thanks for having us. Thank you.
So let's talk with I guess the bigger picture question is the Republican leadership promised a lot of things going into the session. Lauren, do you think that they're on track to fulfill some of their major promises?
I think they would say that they're on track to fulfill their promises. Look, all they need to do at the end of the session is pass some kind of legislation, and they're going to be able to point to that, when they're coming up against these big elections. There has been a question about the tax legislation. I mean, Governor Greg Abbott and the Big Three raised it themselves in that press conference a couple weeks ago when they said, are we doing enough to give people real relief, to actually lower people's tax bills? And that is uncertain, because if the legislation that seems to be the best, have the best chance of becoming law actually does, then people will see their tax bills maybe slow down the rate of increase, but they're not actually going to be seeing them fall. And so I think that's going to be the biggest question is that enough? Are people going to be happy with that? And are the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker going to be happy with it?
And I've seen, kind of a notable pivot from when you bring up the property tax legislation. Speaker Bonnen was very much, people will notice the transparency aspects of this, where, if you have a question of who's raising your taxes, you can go and find that now. Austin, where I live is the problem there seems to be just the taxes are too high for a lot of people. Do you think that people will notice the transparency aspect? Is that something that people cared about going in, or the people talked about?
I mean, living in Austin, the property values are going to continue to go up. They might not go, your taxes might not go up as much because this bill might have a limitation on there, but whatever savings they put in there, there's a good chance that those will be erased in the next few years as values continue to go up. So I don't, will people look back 5 years from now and say, this was the session that, we got property taxes under control? I think that's a big question.
Yeah, and it's all about messaging now, right? I mean, whether they achieve their goals or not it's in the eye of the beholder, right? And what's interesting about these tax relief bills is I think they actually even changed how they were describing them. The name of, it went from tax reform or tax relief to tax transparency. And so that in it of itself was a real tell that, you know, this isn't necessarily something that's going to fix anything, especially in the long term, but it's what they could get right now.
Speaker Bonnen said he's not going to get involved in incumbent Democratic races. Doesn't that somewhat take a lot of money and a big name off the table in this next fight for the Texas House?
Sure, yeah, and there are reasons for that. Obviously, he needs Democrats to get certain legislation through, and will want to work with them kind of going forward, as he presumably wants to be Speaker for a long time. You know, one of the things to keep in mind here is that there's going to be a lot of factors kind of beyond the members of the state house's control in 2020. You know, there's going to be a presidential election. There's a possibility that whoever the Democratic nominee will be trying to keep Texas in play. There's going to be a U.S. Senator race. There's going to be, a lot of kind of coattail effects too. And so, I think Democrats have a lot of energy right now and a lot of hope. And I guess we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, I was talking to a Republican in the House the other day who shall remain nameless about this. And he was saying, this has been a quiet session when it comes to the really over-the-top controversial issues, and it reminded him of the last time that the House flipped, when it went from Democratic held to Republican held. And he said, in that session, the Republicans, as the minority party, were pretty quiet. They were measured because they knew that they were about to become the majority party and that they would be fighting against, these upstart Democrats. And so he said he's seeing that now. Democrats are kind of playing nice. Everyone's playing nice with each other because there's a possibility of the House flipping and it becoming democratically held. So everyone wants their relationships to end off very well before they go into the next election.
Last question for both of you. In the last week of the legislature, what are you interested or watching in particular?
Medical marijuana bills are big. The lieutenant governor said that he's not in favor of lowering penalties for marijuana possession, but there are some medical marijuana bills that are still in play, and these would expand who would be able to access medical cannabis for different ailments and diseases, and I think that a lot of people have their eyes on that.
I think when Speaker Bonnen became Speaker, people kind of looked at his voting record and thought he was a more conservative speaker than Speaker Strauss, and people were wondering whether there was going to be a rightward turn for the House. There's a lot of kind of socially conservative bills, whether it's the Chick-fil-A bill or a voting bill, things like that we'll kind of get to see now how devoted is he to these issues.
Well, Matt, Lauren, thanks for joining us.
And if we need to be part of NamUs in order to get police to submit the stuff, then we'll carry a bill and do that. But like I said, we're going to be in touch with NamUs today and talk to them.
It's a system that could bring answers to missing person cases across Texas. So why aren't police using it? Plus, it can turn traffic fines into a never-ending cycle of debt. Now, lawmakers are ready to end the driver responsibility program. How their plan could make you pay a little more to get behind the wheel. One week to go. Lawmakers can see the light at the end of the legislative session. So this is the time bills we've covered will make it to law or will not. State senators took historic steps making hemp legal in Texas. They approved State Representative Tracy King's Hemp Farming Act. Texas farmers will soon be able to grow hemp and make products like CBD oil legally. Under current law, hemp is classified like marijuana, even though it won't get you high. But farmers will face regulations, like paying a fee to grow it and having their fields tested by law enforcement.
It'll be a highly regulated crop. The seed will be regulated. The crop will be regulated. We'll have to monitor and inspect and test and things like that. But so will the other states. So we'll be on an equal footing.
The bill now goes back to the House for final approval before it goes to Governor Abbott to sign or veto. The change comes after the 2018 Farm Bill ended the federal ban on growing hemp. But to be recognized as hemp instead of an illegal cannabis plant, it can't contain more than 0.3% THC. That's the compound that will get you high. The feds require state agriculture departments to develop a regulation plan, and it must first be approved by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the much talked about beer-to-go change looks like it now will happen. The wholesale beer distributors finally agreed to the idea. That powerful group originally held out when the Texas Craft Brewers Guild and Beer Alliance of Texas announced the bipartisan effort. Texas is the only state that currently does not allow you to buy beer at a local brewery and take it home. Beer-to-go is an amendment to the sunset bill for the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission. The Senate is expected to vote on the bill next week. Lawmakers have to pass it in order for the TABC to continue operating. 1.5 million Texas drivers have suspended licenses because of unpaid traffic fees, but all could be forgiven as state lawmakers end a program that ratchet up those payments. The Senate voted unanimously Wednesday to end the state's driver responsibility program. The program makes drivers pay fees on top of unpaid traffic fines. Critics say that hurts Texans who can't afford to pay, trapping them in a cycle of debt. Lawmakers tried to kill the program last session but failed, in part because money from the program goes to help pay for the state's trauma care system. This time, the House added ways to cover those costs, including raising the fine for DWIs, increasing original traffic fines, and adding a $2 fee on auto insurance plans. The bill needs one more review in the House before heading to the governor. The House approved a measure to increase police transparency when a suspect dies in custody. Closing the so-called dead suspect loophole was added as an amendment to the Senate Bill 944, an open amendment bill. This comes after our investigation revealed law enforcement agencies across the state use this loophole to keep records secret. The bill now goes back to the Senate to decide whether to keep that measure in before they send it to the governor.
We've had family members of missing persons come into the NamUs database, search through the unidentified decedents, and essentially solve their own cases. They found matches to their missing person.
It's a Texas-based system that could help solve missing person cold cases. So why don't police always use it? We look for answers in our Mayberry, Texas investigation coming up.
Chair lays out House Bill 3041 and calls on Representative Guerin.
In 2001, a lawmaker from Fort Worth named Charlie Guerin, it was his freshman term in the state legislature. He authored a bill that required police to submit DNA in missing persons cases to the University of North Texas Health Science Center, which is in Guerin's district.
Tonight I stand before you and ask for your favorable consideration on legislation that, in my opinion, addresses an issue of somber importance in the state.
So police can ask family members to submit their own DNA. If an unidentified body is found somewhere, then they can hopefully make a match and find out, is this my missing loved one?
There's over 200 unidentified bodies that we find each year in the state of Texas. Some skeletal remains, others bodies, and there's not a DNA database to pull from to identify these people. Granted, this is a difficult issue to talk about, but for the families whom this bill affects, it is crucial.
And that's why NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, set up shop there too. This is a system that gathers all types of information in a missing persons case, not just DNA.
Fingerprints, dental records, other identifiers that could be really key to solving a case.
It's open to the public. This is a website that anyone can access.
What's shocking to some people is that not all police departments and investigating agencies are required to use it.
So a lot of the information that you'd think would be there isn't. Some states are being proactive though, like New York and Michigan, Tennessee, Illinois. They've all required their police to submit all missing persons information to NamUs. One state that doesn't do it though is Texas, even though NamUs is housed in our own backyard.
We're a state that doesn't require law enforcement to participate in NamUs, and the reason that we don't is because they already do.
The numbers tell us that not all of them are. There's 5,600 active missing persons cases in Texas right now, according to the FBI and DPS, but only 1,200 people are entered into the NamUs system. So it seems like there's a lot of people, that's just in the last 20 years, that are missing that aren't in the NamUs system.
If I thought that we we, being law enforcement in Texas, were not participating in a meaningful manner, then I think it would be necessary for us to pass legislation that would require it.
Knowing that other states are requiring law enforcement agencies to report to NamUs, do you think it's at least something Texas should explore?
If we need to be part of NamUs in order to get police to submit the stuff, then we'll carry a bill and do that. I think that the more information that's out there on missing person, the more that's available, the better. I appreciate you bringing this to us.
Online now, Mayberry, Texas, the digital investigation. Watch the entire docuseries right now, plus an interactive timeline of the crucial days after Jamie Mayberry disappeared. Plus, we analyze thousands of missing persons in Texas and feature emotional stories from across the state for you to watch. And take an inside look at what launched this project and the impact it's already having at the Capitol. Also, don't forget our weekly investigative Catalyst podcast. This season is all about missing persons and the system shortfalls we found to solving their cases. Links to it all on mayberrymissing.com right now. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazin. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.